I'm Kelda Yoon. Tonight, the latest stats show inflation is now the highest it's been in 3 decades.
It feels like, I think, to most Canadians that inflation is just inescapable at this point.
Leading the jump, the cost of groceries and shelter. We're looking at how long the higher costs could stick around. Plus,
I strongly believe that education should play a larger role in this election.
the chair of the Toronto School Board says whoever wins the provincial election will need to step up with education funding, or cuts could be on the way. And Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall continue their tour of Canada with a stop in the nation's capital. Canada's inflation rate is accelerating. It hit 6.8% in April, its highest level in more than 30 years. And leading the way, food prices. Alison Northcott reports.
Canada's inflation rate continues to climb, with the cost of groceries alone up nearly 10% compared to last year, the biggest increase in more than 40 years. This food bank has seen a jump too.
In April, per week, we were seeing over 1,300 people per week, which was the highest on record for us.
Statistics Canada says Russia's invasion of Ukraine, poor weather in growing regions, and fertilizer and natural gas prices have all made groceries more expensive. And consumers are also paying more for other necessities like shelter and gas, while wages lag behind. Prince Edward Island had the highest inflation rate in Canada.
I'm on a fixed income and we only have my wife working. I wouldn't say we're really broke, but we're teetering on it. We're having a real tough time.
It just keeps going higher and higher. It's giving us a tougher time to be able to afford more groceries than we normally did a couple of months ago.
Feels like, I think, to most Canadians that inflation is just inescapable at this point.
This economist says while the Bank of Canada can't control global factors like supply chain problems, energy costs and war, it can raise interest rates to try to slow borrowing and cool things domestically.
Shelter inflation is coming primarily from higher house prices. And if the Bank of Canada can cool some of that, it's going to help to cool overall inflation.
He says in raising rates, the bank needs to take it slow and steady to avoid a recession. Economists say expect another rate hike next month. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
As you just heard, the cost of groceries saw the largest increase. Now in Humber River Black Creek, a Toronto riding with one of the lowest voter turnouts in the province, food affordability is a major issue. I visited Jane and Finch to see how residents are being affected by the soaring price of groceries and what one local organization wants party leaders to pay more attention to. Christine Lee is letting me tag along on a grocery trip.
I think these ones are really expensive.
Lee says she and her parents used to spend between $95 to $200 on groceries a week. Now it can go up to $250.
Yeah, it's like crazy, right?
Today, though, she's only grabbing a few things for herself. And the grand total, $52.52 for 11 items.
Oh my God, it's $11.99 for turkey. What?
She's not the only one with sticker shock.
How much more are you spending on groceries compared to a year ago? Have you noticed?
Average of about $60–65. Definitely, there are some things I don't buy anymore. Things like yogurt and ice creams.
The prices are rising and your salary is not rising to match the prices at the supermarket.
And while Christine is still able to afford most of the healthy foods she enjoys,
I'd say in this area, I don't think people can actually afford healthy food in general. We're really undersourced and undervalued as residents who live in this area.
Zakaya Tafari is the executive director of African Food Basket in Jane and Finch. During the pandemic, he worked with the city to create Black Food Toronto, providing fresh weekly produce to those who need it.
In one weekend, we actually developed a wait list of 6,000 households. So for us specifically, we
Toronto, providing fresh weekly produce to those who need it.
In one weekend, we actually developed a wait list of 6,000 households. So for us specifically, we focus on fresh produce. We also try to focus on cultural produce. So when a typical family is going to a grocery store, mangoes might be $1.99 a pound or, $1.50 each. If they're on a budget, and they only have so much that they can spend, these are things that they might skip.
And when it comes to the cost of food, the Liberals have vowed to remove the provincial portion of the HST on all prepared foods under $20. The NDP says it will create a provincial food strategy to help bring down the cost of groceries by supporting local agriculture jobs and regulating the price of gas to lower the cost of shipping. The Green Party promising a grocery code of conduct that it says will make food more affordable by leveling the playing field for all retailers. The PCs didn't put forth any explicit measures to lower food prices, but point to tax relief and social support programs, which it says will help families with the cost of groceries. Tafari says he would like to see more focus on access to healthy food and ensuring communities like his are well nourished.
We see food as medicine. And if we can encourage people to eat healthy now, that's going to save so much money on our healthcare system down the road. So rather than just investing in, whether it's supporting pharmaceutical companies or supporting the medical industry in terms of certain pieces, support organizations that are improving health through food. But we'd like to be able to see them prioritize organizations like ours that maybe are a little bit more smaller, but are serving a large community.
Facing a $52 million deficit, the Toronto District School Board says it's ready to endorse any party that can bail them out of their cash crunch. Now, without financial help, the board says it may have to make more staffing cuts. Ali Chiasson has the latest.
The TDSB is currently projecting a deficit of $52.2 million for the 2022-23 school year.
That's primarily due to structural and pandemic costs, as well as declining enrollment. TDSB Chair Alexander Brown describes the situation as urgent.
Should additional funding not be provided to address the impacts of the pandemic, savings will need to be found and cuts will need to be made.
They're already seeing staffing reductions among vice principals and school safety monitors.
So we're seeing these kind of decreases in staff that are essential for our schooling.
The TDSB says ahead of the election, they need the candidates to commit to adequate and stable funding of Toronto's public schools.
Improving the school system is an area where you would think there would be some common ground among all the political parties. But of course, they all have very different ideas of how to address the issue. Let's take a look at what's in their platforms.
The PCs plan to invest about $14 billion over the next 10 years to support school infrastructure, including $1.4 billion to renew and maintain schools for the next school year.
We're going to get it done. They're going to talk about it, and people are going to have a clear choice on June the 2nd.
The Liberals want to cancel Highway 413 and use the $10 billion in planned savings to build 200 more schools and repair another 4,500.
An Ontario Liberal government will do everything we can to set our kids up for success in our publicly funded schools.
And the NDP wants a comprehensive review of the state of schools in the province to be completed within a year, then overhaul the education funding formula entirely. In her experience as NDP education critic, Merritt Stiles says fixing our schools is a big topic when door knocking.
Regular people are like, where are the extra teachers? Why doesn't my kid have more educational assistance? Where's the extra support for our special needs kids? We should not be in a position right now where the Toronto District School Board is forced to cut spending, but we need to be in a position where we can start to fix that. And we need to do it fast because our kids are suffering.
With the election approaching fast, the TDSB chair says,
I encourage all voters, when candidates come to their door, to ask them how they will better support our schools and public education.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
In the latest update of the CBC News Ontario poll tracker, some polls suggest support for Doug Ford's PC party could be softening. However, if the election were held today, the PCs would still be heavily favored to win another majority. Let's bring in our Queen's Park reporter, Mike Crowley, who is looking at the path to that majority for the Progressive Conservatives. And Mike, if the PCs win on June 2nd, how much does it matter whether it's a majority or a minority?
Well, Kelda, for the PCs, this is an absolutely crucial difference because winning a majority is the only way that Doug Ford stays in power. That's because all the opposition parties, the NDP, the Liberals and the Greens, say they will not support Ford in a minority. So if the PCs do not get that majority, as soon as they try to do anything in the legislature, like bring in a throne speech or pass a budget, they can expect that they would be defeated and the government would fall.
So Mike, with a majority being so crucial, what is the PC party's strategy to get there?
So the easiest way for them is simply to hang on to the seats that they won last time. Now, that was 70 6 seats across Ontario. It's 13 more than they need for a majority. And the strategy here to hold on to these is to put some special emphasis on protecting the ridings where they are the most vulnerable. Now, I've talked to the parties and analyzed the results from the last election and identified these seats as the key. Now, if the PCs can hold on to most of these ridings, it's safe to say that they are on their way to another majority. Now, it's a mix of ridings in various parts of the province. There are quite a number here in the GTA, but also a few in the Kitchener area, plus there's 1 seat in Ottawa and places like Peterborough and Barrie. And Kelda, if there's one common thread, these are all seats that the Liberals held when they were in power, and the PCs managed to take them in 2018 when the Liberal vote collapsed. And in many of these ridings, it was actually the NDP that came second last time.
Now, of the ridings you've identified as key for the PCs, which in particular do you have your eyes on and why?
So let's start with Ottawa West Nepean, and that's because this seat is really the canary in the coal mine. It was the slimmest margin of victory for the PCs in the entire province last time. Jeremy Roberts, their candidate, won by just 1/3 of a percentage point. So if he hangs on in this election, it would be a super good sign for Doug Ford's chances. So definitely watch that race on election night. And then I would look to the PC-held ridings in Brampton and in Mississauga. The PCs, they won 2 seats in Brampton last time by narrow margins. One of them was less than 500 votes. And Doug Ford showed just how important Brampton is to him by kicking off his campaign there. We've also seen the NDP's Andrea Horwath in Brampton a lot. Now, the other seats are Mississauga, the 6 seats there. Mississauga is a really important barometer because the seats there tend to swing altogether to whichever party forms the government. So I'm going to be watching Mississauga very closely through the rest of the campaign and on election night, because if the other parties can't claw at least some of those 6 seats away from the PCs, it's hard to see how they have any realistic chance of holding Doug Ford to a minority.
All right, thanks so much, Mike. That's the CBC's Queen's Park reporter, Mike Crawley. PC leader Doug Ford announcing more union endorsements during a stop in Hamilton today.
I'm very grateful for the endorsement from the International Association of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers, Local Union 285, and the Ontario Pipe Trades Council of the United Association of Journey Persons and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry.
Ford gaining the backing of 2 more unions. In total, 6 unions are now throwing their support behind the Ford campaign. The PC party has been courting Labour for months, hoping to draw votes away from the NDP. A cost of living is the top issue in the election campaign. Liberals have signed a 19-point affordability pledge that it says will help all Ontario families. Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca outlined his party's top priorities for childcare this morning.
Today I'm here to announce that an Ontario Liberal government would fully fund an expanded 18-month parental leave program and make sure that all of the gaps that might exist for some workers in this province relating to 18-month parental leave would be filled.
Del Duca says this could save families up to $255 a week. The program would be in addition to $10 a day childcare, a deal Doug Ford's government signed with the federal government back in March. Through that deal, parents were supposed to start seeing rebates in May, but the sector is now saying it could take months longer for those to kick in. NDP leader Andrea Horwath is on a campaign swing through Eastern Ontario. She started in Kingston last night before heading to Ottawa this afternoon. Now, Eastern Ontario hasn't been a stronghold for the New Democrats, but they did manage several breakthroughs in the region in the last election. As Joanne Cianello explains, the party is looking to improve on that performance.
Talk about strong. Talk about ready. Talk about working for you. That's Mary Rita Holland.
Andrea Horwath's stop in Kingston started at a downtown brew pub last night. The NDP leader held another event in the city this morning, all in a bid to hang on to the riding of Kingston and the Islands, which the NDP won in 2018 for the first time in more than 20 years. Horwath suggests that the NDP's previous advances in Eastern Ontario give the party more validity out here this time around.
The best way to describe it for me is having a chance to connect with people in Eastern Ontario like we haven't been able to do in years gone by.
The incumbent isn't running again. Instead, the party is running the former president of the Ontario NDP, Mary Rita Holland. She's run twice in the past and has been a Kingston City Councillor for 2 terms. This is the sort of riding that the NDP has to hang on to win the election, or even keep its status as official opposition. It's also a riding the Liberals have targeted after their collapse in the last election.
I'm really delighted to be here today in Kingston and the Islands, standing alongside Ted Chu, someone whose track record of exceptional public service.
Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca was in Kingston a week and a half ago on a very windy day with his own candidate, former Liberal MP Ted Chu, considered a rising star when he decided not to run for re-election in 2015. It's such an important race that both Horwath and Del Duca are expected to take time away from their all-important GTA campaigning to return to Kingston and Eastern Ontario. Today, Horwath also stopped in on the NDP candidate in the traditionally progressive Conservative riding of Lanark-Frontenac-Kingston before moving on to Ottawa. Her target, Ottawa West Nepean, where the NDP candidate lost by a mere 175 votes last time around. And yet again, it's a riding the Liberals want to take back. Horwath says she knows Ontarians who want to keep the PCs out have struggled in the past over whether to vote New Democrat or Liberal.
But this time, the NDP has not only an amazingly strong team, we have a number, almost 40 people that have legislative experience because we were the official opposition. Mr. Del Duca's team didn't even have party status.
Joanne Canello, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, Colette, definitely a jacket weather today, especially earlier. I had to run back in and grab an extra layer.
Yeah, when I went out early this morning for my walk, I had a toque on. And again, maybe not everybody goes to those extremes, but that's what made me comfortable. And, you know, definitely it's cool. I mean, these are the current temperatures, not the daytime highs, but just when you consider that a daytime high for Toronto this time of year is about 20 degrees, nearly 10 degrees off the mark for Mississauga, Toronto at the moment anyway, and slightly better there in Markham with 14 and 13 for St. Catharines. We do have that wet weather that's working its way towards us, and not just working its way, it's been there to the west and kind of south through the afternoon hours. You can see some of the heavier bands a little bit more organized, and then that's kind of passing through, but there's another band to come. And so far, this batch has really been kind of hugging along the north shores of Lake Erie and then pushing into the Niagara region, but it's not going to stay there. There's more energy to come, and as that works its way through, we do get into more organized off and on showers through the night tonight, through the GTA, although it also kind of hugs close to the north shore of Lake Ontario, so it doesn't go that far north in terms of this energy. You'll see some differences in terms of what's rotating towards us and into eastern Ontario. There will be some more significant amounts of rainfall, not so much for the city, but I'll also tell you that we will get into clearing for tomorrow afternoon. The sun will come out, westerly winds kick in, and the temperatures will be going up. So it's a really kind of a day where the starts off wet and then improves dramatically into the afternoon. These are the rainfall amounts, so you can see nothing necessarily to write home about with that energy. Overnight tonight, 10 degrees, and then tomorrow afternoon, 22 for that daytime high in that clearing, Kelda.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
Advocates are calling on the provincial government to release staffing level reports in Ontario long-term care homes, as staffing shortages have plagued the sector, particularly during the pandemic. And some families say the problem persists. Natalie Collada has more.
I showed up one day and he was sleeping and he smelled of feces. So I had to find somebody to change and clean him. And my thought was, I don't know how long he was left like that.
Marianne Kolibash travels every month to see, visit, and care for her elderly father in his Sudbury long-term care home. She says the facility is often short-staffed.
The staff are literally running around all the time. They are so overworked.
The province set a direct care target of 3 hours per resident by March 31st. The Ontario Health Coalition reached out to 70 of the more than 600 long-term care homes in the province to see if they were meeting that goal. Only 23 provided that information.
We found that only 6 of the homes had actually met the 3-hour target. It means that every task is rushed. It means that they're not toileted. They're left to wait in wet diapers for those diapers to be changed. They're not actually toileted. It means that feeding is rushed.
To get an accurate understanding of the state of long-term care in Ontario, advocates say more information is needed.
We demand that the government release immediately the full reports from each home that they received. Ontarians have the right to know which homes are meeting the government targets and which ones are providing less care.
In a statement to CBC, the Ministry of Long-Term Care says data collection is underway and will be reported publicly before March 31st next year. In the meantime, family members with loved ones in long-term care wait and wonder.
It leaves me questioning and very concerned about what other gaps in care that I don't see and what's happening to the residents who have no voice and no advocate.
Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
The surrender of Ukrainian fighters at the steel mill in Mariupol has opened a new political front in the war with Russia. The fate of the soldiers is now a big question. Now, Ukraine sees them as prisoners of war, but many in Russia are calling them war criminals and want them to stand trial. Briar Stewart reports.
Russia says over the past 2 days, nearly 1,000 Ukrainian fighters have surrendered from the besieged Azovstal steel plant. But there's a lot of uncertainty about just what happens next. Russia has released video of the fighters being brought out, many of them on stretchers. Others walk out on their own, have their belongings searched, even their tattoos checked by Russian soldiers. And they're basically all now in territory that's occupied by Russia. When Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the other day that the fighters at Azovstal could finally stand down, he talked about being prisoners of war and how they would eventually be exchanged for prisoners that Ukraine has. But a lot of that has fallen into doubt, and that's because some of the messages that have been emanating out of Russia. You have senior politicians who describe these fighters as war criminals and say that they should be brought before a judge and not exchanged. And I think it's hard to overstate just the propaganda value of this for Russia. Some of these fighters are from the Azov Regiment. It's a group that had far-right links that was rolled in with Ukraine's National Guard in 2014. And Russia has long accused this group and these fighters of being neo-Nazis. So there is, I think, probably a big desire for Russia to try to make that case now and try to convince its population. And so that's why there is just so much uncertainty about what will happen next. And Ukrainian officials have not released any information at all, saying that the whole situation is highly sensitive and they don't want to release any details that could compromise the process. But right now, the big thing is that you have nearly 1,000 Ukrainian fighters in Russia's hands. And with the surrender of the Azovstal steel plant, you have Russia now in full control of the strategic port city of Mariupol. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Kiev.
Russia is closing the CBC bureau in Moscow. There are 10 employees at both Radio Canada and CBC News assigned there. They are being stripped of their visas and accreditation. Now, Russian officials say it's in retaliation for Canada's ban on Russian state TV airing here. Ashley Burke has the details.
Céline Galipo, CBC News, Moscow.
Elizabeth Farmer, CBC News, Moscow.
George Schlesinger, CBC News, Moscow.
44 years of CBC coverage on the ground in Russia. Correspondents documenting firsthand pivotal moments in Russian history. The Cold War, collapse of the Soviet Union, political upheaval. Now at another historic moment, the war in Ukraine, Russia's expelling CBC News.
We've been there for the good and the bad, and I'm really sorry Russia has taken this decision.
It's believed to be the first time that a foreign government has ever forced the closure of a CBC bureau. Russia says it's striking back after Canada's broadcast regulator in March banned Russian state-controlled TV RT from Canadian airwaves. The government said it was spreading Russian disinformation about the war in Ukraine, a decision that had nothing to do with CBC News, which operates independently.
It's unfortunate, but not surprising, that he's trying to shut down strong journalistic institutions.
It is clear that Putin and his enablers cannot imagine a world in where the press is free and doesn't take its marching orders from the government.
The Kremlin has been cracking down on media, bringing in new measures in March that would impose a prison term of up to 15 years on journalists whose reporting went against the Kremlin's official line. Now an escalation of this trend, targeting freedom of the international press.
Boots on the ground matter. I mean, being there on the ground, in person, to bear witness matters.
Fenlund says CBC News will continue to cover Russia as best as it can, but he says working around this expulsion will make it more difficult. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
New stories are emerging on the investigation into a China Eastern Airlines crash back in March. The Wall Street Journal and other outlets are reporting that investigators are looking at a potential human cause for the crash. And sources say the data indicates it might have been intentional. Reporter Richard Kimber has more from Hong Kong.
The Wall Street Journal report is a significant step forward in this investigation after some 2 months of relative silence from both the US and the Chinese side of the investigation into the highly abnormal behavior of the Boeing 737-800 aircraft before it crashed into a mountainside in southern China. The report suggests that people familiar with the US side of the investigation are specifically focusing on what may have been taking place inside the cockpit of the plane, suggesting that it may have been deliberate action by either a pilot or by another person on board who possibly broke into the cockpit and downed the plane with full intention and understanding of what they were doing. Chinese aviation regulators have not commented on the Wall Street Journal report. Just a few weeks ago, they had corroborated investigations from both Boeing and the US side that there was no obvious technical deficiency with the plane. But the Chinese aviation regulators had stressed that in their own investigations, they had no reason to suspect that there was any intention from the pilots or a lack of experience with regards to their operating the passenger jet. They said that all pre-flight health checks had been cleared for the pilots, that all background checks on the pilots, no cause for concern, and that the main captain on the aircraft happened to be one of China's most experienced passenger jet aviators. If indeed this turns out to have been human behavior at fault, it significantly opens the door again for Boeing to start expanding in China, which has long been its most profitable market because of the sheer size and scale of Chinese airline operations. Richard Kimber, CBC News in Hong Kong.
Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall toured Ottawa today on the second day of their Canadian visit, and it was a busy one. The royals paid their respects at the National War Memorial, visited a Ukrainian cathedral to meet with members of the Ukrainian Canadian community, and watched the RCMP musical ride. David Cochran has the details.
The day started by remembering the great conflicts of the past, with a lament and a wreath laying at the National War Memorial. But as the day unfolded, it focused on the great conflict of the moment. Notably, a visit to a Ukrainian cathedral, where the royal couple took part in a traditional prayer service, a clear expression of solidarity.
And thanks for your desiring and finding time to visit us during the war waged by Russian Federation against our ancestral homeland, Ukraine.
The prince and the duchess were given the traditional Ukrainian greeting of bread and salt. Camilla took some time to decorate Ukrainian eggs as the royal couple went over their scheduled time to meet with members of the Ukrainian community. This trip isn't all about ceremony. There's a tourism component as well. And in Ottawa, that means a visit here to the Byward Market and, of course, a stop at Beaver Tails.
They've got to try the beaver tail. It's a staple.
And so they did, or at least they looked at some beaver tails. Members of the royal family typically don't eat fried dough smothered in toppings while on camera.
It was so wonderful. I've always been into the royals and just the royal family in general.
But the crowd here didn't come to watch the royals eat. They just came to watch them, as they watched the pageantry and tradition of a country where the current prince will be the future king. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Throughout the month of May, the TDSB is offering students a historical guided walking tour of Kensington Market. The tour takes students inside a synagogue and focuses on the stories of Toronto's early Jewish community, largely immigrants from Eastern Europe. Talia Ricci joined one of the groups today.
Okay, team, making our line.
We developed this walking tour of Kensington Market for TDSB students. It's the second year we're operating it. We had a 2-year break during COVID, and it's really designed to introduce the students from across the board to local Jewish history that's rooted here in Kensington Market.
What did you find interesting when you were flipping through the book?
So when I looked through it, I saw that people transformed their shops, houses into shops, which was pretty cool.
And we try to find universal themes that connect Jewish history to what might be the experience of students. So immigration, education.
Excuse me, I've got to get by and I'm late for shul again.
There's very little remnants left of the Jewish history in Kensington. There are a few active synagogues, but most of the Jews left over 60 years ago.
Yay, day, 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 day. 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 You do speak Yiddish. Yay, day, day.
So it's really important to remind people of this important history, and given everything that's going on in the world with this rise of anti-Semitism, it's really nice to teach this history to students who may be completely unfamiliar with it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
What about learning about a new culture? What do you think about that?
I think it's interesting because, most people are normally glued to one culture because, they are supporting one culture, but then once you learn about other things, it gets a lot more interesting.
This congregation started in 1914, and this building opened in 1927.
It's what we do so that we can be better human beings, right? And it's all about acceptance and tolerance and fighting anti-Semitism. So this month and all the other heritage months in TDSB, that's the purpose behind it, is to learn, because when we learn and understand and value people's lived experiences, we're all better for it.
Around 2,500 TDSB students will be participating in this tour throughout Jewish Heritage Month. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
A Toronto woman is warning people to check for ticks after finding dozens on herself and her 2 dogs in the past week. As Dale Manukduk reports, the pandemic is partly to blame for the bug's growing population.
Over the last 7 days, Michelle Snyder has removed some 30 ticks from her body and her dogs Juju and Heavy D. She says it's been a nightmare.
I took 4 more off my dog last night, and one was crawling on me this morning.
Snyder says they've infested her backyard to the point they can't go past the deck.
If you're hanging around in your backyard, this is happening, and it's a concern. If you have kids, you have pets, yourself, I do have to check myself multiple times a day now.
Toronto Public Health says tick populations are expanding. What are generally a concern for hikers marching through the forest is now more prevalent in urban areas.
During COVID, more people were outside. They were, in the forest, in the bushes, in the shrubbery. And again, then we're noticing a lot more hitchhiking from those ticks. And then also during COVID, more people were getting pets.
While the risk of getting Lyme disease from black-legged ticks in the city is still considered low, according to Public Health Ontario, Lyme disease rates in the province more than just ticked up last decade, peaking at nearly 1,200 cases in 2019. There are preventative measures people can take.
If you're going hiking or out in the forest or out in the bush, the best thing to do is get an appropriately labeled insect repellent. And then you want to tuck your pants into your socks, wear closed-toed shoes, have your shirts buttoned right up.
Trina Butler says the move away from pesticides has also contributed to the expansion of ticks, where instead of spraying an infestation, more work is being done to prevent environments where they might thrive. So ensure your grass is cut low and leaf debris is removed promptly. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Yeah, good advice, especially with the warmer weather, more people spending time outside. But today, not so warm, but it's getting there.
Yeah, that's right, Kelton. We're really going to be seeing a pretty dramatic turnaround, but today was not the day for the warmer temperatures. It was for the rainfall that we need that's moving in, although a lot of it staying so far kind of southwest of us. That's going to be changing. So those showers continuing to work their way in overnight tonight and then ending tomorrow morning. We will get into clearing though as we get into the afternoon hours on Thursday. That's going to allow those temperatures to rise. We're going to start to see the humidity coming up the next couple of days though as well. And I call it a split holiday weekend. I mean, kind of the weather conditions are split, but also the temperatures. A couple of very warm and sticky days, and then we turn around and see things cooling down and the air becoming drier too. So let's work you through all of that to come. Daytime highs today well below seasonal, about 5-6 degrees. These are your current temperatures, a lot of 11s out there. Ottawa, the anomaly with more sun. You can see the clearer skies there, so it's 17 degrees right now. There's that rain so far. This kind of bit of energy has been hugging right along the north shore of Lake Erie, but that'll be changing because we have more to come as this next kind of bit of energy rotates through and we get into more organized, but those off and on showers overnight tonight. Not a lot to it, as I was showing earlier in the show, probably around 5 millimeters or so, and then heavier amounts over towards the east and also perhaps up towards the Barrie region where we could be seeing that 5 to 10 millimeters. But this is tomorrow at 2 o'clock, so getting into that clearing, especially west of the GTA, that allows those temperatures to go up, and then we will just kind of watch things overnight. Tomorrow night, a chance for some thunderstorm activity, and then Friday looking pretty good, but then Friday night into Saturday, another line kind of coming through, and then behind that we start to see that cool air beginning to filter in. Tonight, mild temperatures, at least for those overnight lows because of the cloud cover and the rain activity. But let's walk you through what happens here as we go into Friday. So there's that bit of thunderstorm activity in those overnight hours primarily. Friday, though, 29 degrees. I think much of the day looking very good, but feeling more like we're in the low 30s towards the mid 30s in terms of the humidex values. And Saturday, a transition, because as that front comes through, we get into more storminess, and then we'll find those temperatures beginning to drop back down. It's going to take some time for that to happen and for the dew points, that humidity and stickiness to come down. But as we go into the rest of the holiday weekend, Sunday, yes, still a few chance of some showers in there. I know there's a lot of wet weather showing up, but it's not continuous as we look through the holiday weekend, and Victoria Day looking quite lovely, in fact.
Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
A dump truck caught fire in the middle of a downtown intersection this afternoon. Thankfully, no one was injured. Now, it happened around 3 p.m. near Front and Berkeley. You can see from the dash cam footage that the top of the truck hit wires, caused the cables to burst, spark, and then catch fire. Now, police say there was some sort of oil on the truck that caused it to go up in flames. And that oil spilled out onto the street, but has since been cleaned up. Police say the wires were removed from the truck and the fire has been put out. The driver was unharmed. A 16-year-old boy has been charged in a violent attempted carjacking in the city's West End. Now, it happened around yesterday at around 6 p.m. in this Walmart parking lot near Islington and Bergamot Avenue. Police say 3 men approached a woman in a parking lot and demanded her keys and purse. And she was knocked to the ground as the suspects tried, without success, to enter her vehicle. 2 of the suspects fled the scene, while a third fell to the ground and was held down by a passerby until police arrived. Police say they arrested the teen suspect and retrieved a replica handgun. He has been charged with robbery with a firearm and disguise with intent. The arrest comes as Toronto police are reporting an uptick of carjackings in the city. The issue drew national attention after Maple Leaf star Mitch Marner was carjacked outside a movie theater on Monday. Well, some migrant workers on Canadian farms are finding themselves unknowingly getting caught up in illegal cannabis grow-ops. Police say the operations are run by organized crime groups who are generating money for even more profitable and dangerous drug trafficking. They also say Ontario is a hotbed for the grow-ops, and most of the time, the farm workers are oblivious to what's really going on. Jason Vio has more.
The deception starts when the workers are shown documents stating that cannabis is legal in Canada, and sometimes they do see a legitimate license, but they may be growing a lot more than they're allowed. In one case, police say someone had 40 different grow sites, and just recently the OPP raided an illegal pot grow-op and found $6 million worth of the drug. When farm workers are found, the OPP say they rarely get charged.
In most cases, they're super cooperative because they really legitimately have no idea what they're doing is wrong. So they're happy to tell the police who they work for and and what exactly they've been doing and how long they've been doing it.
Some are farm workers from within Canada, but others are migrant workers who sometimes face immigration issues.
These workers are voiceless, abandoned, experiencing many barriers, and they're very big due to their precarious status and lack of representation. They are an easy target for these kind of unscrupulous employers and criminals.
The federal government says if they are not charged or convicted in Canada, they can still obtain work permits here. The CBSA also says if a migrant worker is found to be unknowingly involved with illegal cannabis, they will not automatically be sent home. No matter where they're from, though, the OPP says they're inadvertently helping organized crime groups.
These people only care about money. They only care about the easiest way to make the most amount of money possible. And obviously that's with methamphetamine and cocaine, but in order to buy that in quantity, they need to have the money. So they grow cannabis to get the money, to buy the cocaine, to buy the methamphetamine, and then they traffic them in the communities that you and I live in. For that reason, it's concerning. Just the amount of money that it gives them access to, that makes it scary.
He says in every single organized crime case he's worked on, there's always an illegal cannabis component. That's just there to make them easy, quick cash. And he says the criminals see the penalties as almost risk-free compared to getting caught with cocaine or fentanyl. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX closed down by 389 points. The Dow fell by 1,164 points. The dollar also traded lower at 77.88 cents US. We'll be right back. A woman from Campbellville, just west of Milton, has found her own creative solution to the lack of affordable housing. She bought a train caboose dating back to 1912 and turned it into a tiny home. We went to take a tour and find out just how much it cost.
I've always liked quirky properties, and I like a reno project. And it's close to my son and my grandchildren. And it was, last but not least, affordable. It was listed at $45,000, and that's what I paid. It's 1912 Canadian National caboose. It's the original exterior. The interior has been changed quite a bit. It's not hooked up to septic. It does have hydro, and I'm gutting it, and down the road I'd like to buy land for it, and it'll be a tiny home. The original infrastructure here, what's left of it that you can see, I think really adds. Otherwise it would look like the back of a tractor trailer, pretty much. The previous owner has not tampered with the overall structure. He's just added new windows, which helps. And of course you can see from the wood it's pretty wonky in some places, but that just adds to the charm for me. So this will be the future living room area.
So it looks a little tore up right now.
It does. I pulled out everything that was in it. You can see from the wiring that's left, and there's some styrofoam. It has been insulated, for which I lost some interior space because probably have about 5 to 6 inches on either side that it comes in from the outside walls. And then currently this is just an empty area, and it wasn't really that I know of. There was nothing here that I had to pull out. This is all pretty much the way it is. So when I'm here renovating, I just put the mattress down and stay here. And down the road, it would be a small bedroom. And then my favorite part in here, because it has the high ceilings, is the area that the conductor would have sat in. This is the original bunk where he would have slept, and the original cupboard there. I'm retrofitting a very old structure, arguably for much less than I could do an actual tiny home that you would buy, but it would look different. So with things already in place, it's not purpose-built, so you just have to work around those kind of things. But then again, that's part of the charm.
Well, try not to get hungry watching this. An amateur baker from Britain has one more reason to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee.
It's a lemon and Swiss roll amaretti trifle. We've got lemon curd Swiss roll at the bottom, St. Clement's jelly, so orange and lemon jelly, lemon custard, mandarin coulis made with tinned mandarins, amaretti biscuits in between there.
That's Gemma Melvin, a copywriter by day and passionate baker by night. She took top prize in the Platinum Jubilee Pudding Contest after whipping up her lemon and Swiss roll amaretti trifle. She beat out 5,000 other bakers for the win and says she drew inspiration for her dessert from her grandmother, whose signature dish was trifle. Well, Colette, if you weren't hungry before, that looked good.
It's amazing. I understand why I got first prize, but I'm sure like out of that many entries, second and third probably look pretty good too. Not looking so good on the radar, all right, with the rain showers that are coming through. So we will be seeing some wet conditions. We need some of this wet weather through the overnight, kind of off and on rain showers, and then tapering off tomorrow morning. It's heavier at the moment along the north shores here of Lake Ontario towards Northumberland County, and we're seeing that through that region, but we're going to have more of that energy come through the GTA. Still, it's about 3 to 5 millimeters of rain that we'll be dealing with, so not a ton coming through here. 10 degrees for that overnight temperature. We're pretty close to that, so we're not seeing much of a change with the temperature through the overnight hours. We will be seeing a pretty dramatic change, though, tomorrow. So once we get rid of the showers in the morning hours, then some of the clouds hang in there. Those will be clearing out as we head towards lunchtime, and it gets us into sunshine and rising temperature with that wind getting a little bit breezy at times from the west. So 22, it's going to be a beautiful afternoon tomorrow. Overnight, Thursday into Friday, a few thunderstorms possible, pretty isolated. Friday, hot, a little bit on the sticky side, and then we transition on Saturday for the rest of that holiday weekend being a little bit cooler and more comfortable.
Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
And that is our show tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night.